Hello, everybody. A couple of weeks ago, we did a show with my old friend Greg Lukianoff, one of America's champions of free speech. He's on the show a lot. This time he was talking about not just cancelled students, but coddled autocrats, what he called the crisis of free speech in America. He's the founder and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, otherwise known as FIRE. And today we are refocusing on the value of free speech, but this time from a slightly different angle, from the point of view of psychology and the mental individual benefits of free speech, with my guest, Dr. Chloe Carmichael. Some of you will be familiar with Dr. Carmichael. She's the author of Nervous Energy, which was a bestseller. And she's out with a new book now. It's called Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. Chloe is joining us from Florida, in the suburbs of Orlando, where she fled after COVID. Chloe, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. And it's really an honor to be on with you. And I'm actually a big fan of Greg's as well. He's actually, I quote a lot of Fire's work in my book. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, Greg is an old friend and very outspoken, disliked, it seems, both on the left and the right.
Yeah, he gives it to them all.
Yeah, I hope I'm equally disliked both on the left and the right. Chloe, tell me your argument in Can I Say That? What are you saying that traditional champions of free speech like Greg Lukianoff haven't already said? There have been so many books on the value of free speech. It's rather like apple pie. No one's going to argue against it.
Wow, that's an interesting statement because actually one of the chapters in my book is called Common Objections to Free Speech. So believe it or not, a lot of people do argue against it. But you're right that people like Greg have contributed incredibly in ways that I could not to this discussion. But I do bring a different voice as a clinical psychologist. What I do is I unpack the mental health benefits of free speech. So on a cognitive level, on an emotional level, on a social connection level, for speech and authentic freedom of expression are actually, in my view, very good for mental health. And I explain some of the science about why. And then part 2 of the book is practical techniques I offer as a clinical psychologist to help people with speaking up in difficult situations, as well as with listening very nicely and respectfully, which is something some people really struggle with when things get heated.
Some people accuse me of not being a very good listener. I try to keep my mouth shut while my guests speak, at least. So, Chloe, you've obviously done a lot of thinking and research in this area. I have to admit that personally, I'm not really convinced that people are being scared off free speech. I do agree with you and Greg that free speech matters enormously, both in terms of democracy and individual well-being. But where's your evidence that people aren't saying what they think?
Well, for one thing, I cite a New York Times poll showing that 84% of Americans feel that cancel culture and self-censorship are major issues. So that's I would say pretty big piece of evidence right there.
I never quite trust everything I read in the New York Times. I mean, I always feel
Fair.
that these data points, you can find anything in terms of research and report.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, even from my own personal experience, it actually took a lot for me to get off the free speech sidelines, just on a personal level. I was actually quite afraid to say what I thought about a lot of subjects. I was, doing really well with my practice in New York. I was on VH1 and ABC and Inside Edition, lots of great shows. But I just knew that there were only certain things that I could say. And I never said anything that was untrue, but I just knew I couldn't say certain things. For example, like with Me Too, I knew that they would want to interview me and I could talk about the harms of sexual harassment, but they did not want to hear it if I wanted to say, but also sometimes women lie, right? Also in academia, me getting a PhD.
Women lie, Chloe?
Exactly. I know. Who knew, right? But you couldn't say that, right? People would get deplatformed as well, on X for saying a man can't become a woman. I mean, I actually think that there's a lot of examples with good reason of
I
why
think they probably
people.
got deplatformed on Twitter. I think X encourages that kind of opinion.
Well, also YouTube and Meta also came forward to say that they were experiencing very direct and aggressive pressure, from the government to deplatform and to throttle people. We've also seen parents getting arrested at school board meetings, for speaking up about some of this stuff. So, I mean, I love a good argument. So I love to hear what you have to say. But I will say I'm a little surprised that you don't think that people have actually struggled with this issue.
Yeah, I don't really see much evidence personally. I mean, maybe I don't get out enough in San Francisco. Um, I personally don't see it, and I guess maybe I built my own brand on saying things that aren't particularly popular about technology and culture. Your book got an interesting review on Publishers Weekly. They said it's an
Yes.
important subject, but they said you come at this in a slanted way and that you only cite examples of censorship from the left and you
Which is
don't.
not true.
So tell me, firstly, whether this is, in your view at least, a similar problem both on left and right. I mean, we hear endlessly about woke politics, woke this, woke
Yeah.
that. From your point of view, is it as much a problem on the left as on the right?
Yeah, so first of all, I wanna thank you for bringing that up, that Publishers Weekly. What they said is that it was a slanted polemic for the value of speaking one's mind, even if it's politically incorrect, and I was like, yeah, guilty as charged, like, that's what it is."
Yeah.
But then they also said, which was literally inaccurate, in that review, which you mentioned here just now, is they said that I don't acknowledge, counter examples as far as left to right versus right left, and there's actually a section of the book called "Is This a Republican versus Democrat Issue?" And I literally say in plain English that there have been many times where it's gone the other direction. For example, Republicans during the 1980s were trying to censor, explicit lyrics in rap music. It's been more the conservatives that have tried to, put limits on pornography, which I think there's legitimate questions about whether that's truly a free speech issue. As the author of that Publishers Weekly piece kind of connected there, her big beef with me, it seems, is that I didn't discuss Israel Palestine. She seems to really connect those items together, but it's just simply inaccurate to say
So you
that.
actually, it got misspelled. They called them Palestinian
Yeah,
protests. I don't
they
quite
have
know.
they have a typo in their own
Yeah,
Publishers Weekly
and
review.
that's odd for a book. So do you think that that the problem of suppression of, especially, I mean, Gaza, Palestine, Israel, third rail on lots of fronts in American culture and politics, is the problem with lack of freedom of speech? Is it as much, when it comes to Israel, Palestine, is it as much a problem for you on the left as it is on the right, that you're not supposed to criticize Israel, or if you do, you get accused of being anti-Semitic and vice versa?
Uh, I don't think so because again, there's not issues of parents being arrested at school board meetings for expressing their views on this. We haven't had government involvement at Meta, X, and YouTube to censor, people's speech. We haven't had like FBI agents showing up at people's house to arrest them the way that we've seen with, say, Mark Houck or James O'Keefe. So, I mean, I just don't personally see it as anyone's like the speech
So
police.
yeah, so maybe they're right, these PW people, even if they can't spell, they're right that you're really approaching this as a conservative rather than a liberal.
No, I'm saying that right now, as a snapshot in time, and I also bring out data to share this, I call it the 5 Ds, that right now, and it's not in the DNA of any party, as I explain historically, it can flip flop and go the other way. But right now, there's something I call the 5 Ds. And people who identify as liberal by their own self report are statistically more likely to defriend, disinvite a speaker, decline to date, distance in real life, or drop contact altogether in real life over political differences. And I provide all the research for that, the citations in the book, but also at drchloe.com/ the number 5, the letter D, the letter S. If
So,
people
in other words, what you're really saying is that liberals should buy your book more than conservatives because they need to improve their mental health.
I actually discussed that, and I explained that I like to think of myself as I'm kind of maybe a naive optimist on some level. I believe that for the most part, people are coming from a good place with good intentions, which may be completely foolish, but I like to think that they're coming from a good place and that they're trying to limit speech because they think that it will result in decreased hate speech and bullying and better quality, less misinformation problems, and just a better overall society. And what I want them to understand is that it actually has the opposite effect. When we remove people's ability to express themselves directly, what happens is they resort to violence or to passive aggression. So it is so much better to just allow people to have their disagreements and learn how to tolerate those disagreements than to tell them to just shut up, because that's like covering up a stain on the floor, or just not opening your credit card bills and thinking it makes the debt go away. It doesn't work that way. We have to give people the ability to talk things
I
through.
thought that was the case. That's why I don't open my credit card bills. I would assume they'll go away, or I'll hand it to my wife. No, I take your point, Chloe. You're obviously going to claim that you're neither on the right nor the left, although I did some research on you, and you appear a lot on Fox, which is a right-wing network, and some of the more right-wing shows like the Jesse Walters show. I haven't seen you show up. Do you ever get invitations on MSNBC or CNN?
No, I don't. So, I mean, I think the fact that I, with this book, have appeared more on the right-wing media than the left is, again, just more a reflection of the fact that right now the right is embracing free speech more than the left. It's not that I'm getting invited left and right, but I only take the right. And in fact, there's been times in the past where I appeared a whole lot more on the left, but that was when I was just talking more about the healthy function of anxiety with my previous book. But I'm very open to conversations with anybody.
But when it comes to, say, free speech from the right point of view, conservatives are saying now that if you do express any criticism of Israel, you're an anti-Semite. You can't make jokes when some right-wing person is assassinated. Uh, there is, it seems to me at least, a degree of intolerance on the right when it comes to free speech, which equals that on the left. Would you agree with that?
I love this conversation. So I want you to know I'm not dismissing what you're saying, but I do think that these are different. So let's unpack those examples that you're bringing up. Okay. So you said, for example, if you criticize Israel at all, then people on the right, might cancel you. So first of all, I don't think that's true. Because say Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, they've been very vocal, and they're still like in connection with places like TPUSA, which was Charlie Kirk's place. And so I think that there is a lot of disagreement even within the right about Israel. I think that the issue that people on the right had with some of the talk about Israel on the left was when it was things like from the river to the sea, globalize the intifada. When they were talking, the complaint was that some of the speech on the right was actually, or sorry, some of the speech on the left was actually becoming an incitement to violence, that was the concern. But just simply saying, I don't like Netanyahu, or whatever. I don't think I think Israel's been carrying on too long with the war in Gaza. People might disagree with that, but I didn't see people trying to stop that speech or deplatform that speech. And then the other example you gave about Charlie Kirk, we can get to that too, but I want to give you a chance if there was more you wanted to say here about this.
No, I mean, and I didn't mention Kirk, but where
You
does
said
free
jokes about a right-wing figure that was assassinated. Was that
right?
Charlie Kirk, or did you mean someone else?
Well, I'm thinking more broadly, but can one make jokes about things that are rather distasteful? I mean, where does free speech, and whether one's on the right or the left, there has been a lot of criticism of people who didn't take the Kirk assassination particularly seriously, or perhaps sometimes even celebrated it. Should we be allowed to do that? Is that what free speech is?
So, yes. I mean, so even within free speech, we have, lawful but awful speech, right? Like in many ways, that's what the First Amendment is intended to do, is to protect, freedom of speech, period. However, again, when we think about, say, just social norms and social taboos, employers are not required to just employ anybody. And when it comes to making jokes or celebrating the assassination of somebody, again, we're getting there into the issue of violence. And violence is one of the primary, firewalls around free speech. When you're canceling somebody because they say, I don't believe a man can become a woman, you're canceling them about, just viewpoint discrimination issues. When you maybe socially distance yourself from someone because they are celebrating political violence, I would put that in a different category.
Yeah, it's rather poor taste. What's your position, particularly in terms of the book, on this latest controversy over Tucker Carlson inviting Nick Fuentes onto his podcast? A lot of controversy, particularly within the Heritage Foundation. Some people would argue, especially people who aren't keen on Nick Fuentes, that he really is encouraging violence, locking blacks up, throwing Jews out of America. Should Carlson have had Fuentes on on his show? And what does your book, Can I Say That, suggest to guys like Carlson, who are really getting very close to the line, sailing close to the wind on free speech issues, and perhaps from a broadcasting point of view in an interesting way?
Well, that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. I do have a question though for you, so that I can answer your question, because I don't know a great deal about Nick Fuentes. I did actually watch little clips of that interview, and I also watched Nick Fuentes on Candace Owens, so it's not like I'm totally ignorant of who he is, but I also don't, know everything about Nick Fuentes either. So is Nick Fuentes someone that has ever actually advocated for violence against any group? Because I've never actually heard him do that. I've heard him express, viewpoints about, race mixing or something, like, which I disagree with. But I
Well, to put it
personally,
mildly, I mean, some people might take that in a violent way, but I mean, I don't want to turn this into a conversation about Fuentes, because as you say, you don't know much about him. But I mean, he is an explicit neo-Nazi, shows up often wearing Nazi flags, seems to celebrate the Holocaust or question the Holocaust, actively racist in terms of making public statements about locking all black people up. So there's certainly a violent undertone to what he says, to put it mildly.
yeah, I mean, again, I'd have to hear like something more direct, but I will just say in a general sense, no, I don't have a problem, with Tucker Carlson bringing somebody on, frankly, even if Tucker wanted to bring David Duke on and, interview him, even if it's just to expose, bad ideas. I
Well, yeah, but
don't.
the point of this particular controversy is that Carlson invited him on into a friendly atmosphere and gave his views, which many people consider profoundly distasteful, a degree of credibility, because he has a very popular podcast. So, I mean, so what you're saying is that you're troubled with, I don't know, parent boards where people argue a lot about what kids can and can't learn in school, but you're not too bothered with Nick Fuentes appearing on Tucker Carlson.
As long as it's just viewpoints, and again, that's why I was very curious to know if he's specifically advocating violence, because I view that differently. But if somebody, even as a woman, wants to get on and do a whole podcast about how women are stupid, I have no interest in trying to deplatform that person. So,
So where does it stop then? Is it the threat of violence you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's pretty much a red line for me is the threat of violence, incitement to violence, or fraud, defamation, libel, just the things that the Supreme Court has already outlined. Which I also explain in the book is that we'll have a lot less anxiety about free speech if we understand what exactly the true boundaries are when we say, like, hey, I'm a free speech absolutist. Most people don't actually mean, and that includes, using speech to order a hit on somebody. Being interested in free speech means, as you said, having a red line about violence, fraud, defamation, and libel. Other than that, it's just viewpoints. And I can totally disagree with it, but that doesn't mean I want to shut the person up. To me, again, as a psychologist, that feels like a psychotic way to deal with something I don't like, to just, cover my ears and pretend it's not there and try to have their tongue cut out. That doesn't solve anything.
So let's get to the fact that you're a psychologist. You're coming at this in contrast, perhaps, with someone like Greg Lukianov, who's a graduate of Stanford Law School. You're coming at this as a psychologist. You have a PhD in psychology. What are the psychological consequences of the absence of free speech? Does it undermine us? Does it make us miserable?
Yeah, I think it does. So, as we all know, many people today are familiar with a lot of basic psychology terms like repression, suppression, denial. So, basically, when we stuff things in and bottle things up, our cortisol levels go way up, for one thing. We become a lot less able to, deal with problems and solve problems. So, for example, I tell a story in the book about a client that was told by his workplace that he wouldn't be getting a promotion because they, needed to promote more women. And he just did like a total denial in the moment. He put on a smile and said, okay, and acted like it was fine. And then basically started unconsciously acting out distrust with women in his life. And then when we connected the dots there, he was able to deal with the problem more directly by speaking to an employment lawyer and then able to, not be acting out that frustration with just random other women in his life. So, I mean, I could go on all day about it, but repression, suppression, denial, being able to, solve problems effectively, as well as to have what we call high quality social support. We're in an epidemic of loneliness. And when we can't be authentic with each other or other people are not authentic with us, it degrades the quality of our social support.
Yeah, you use a lot of the catchwords of your profession, or you just use the A word, a word that I was very skeptical on. Anyone who uses the word, I always think of Ariana Huffington here. Whenever she used the word authenticity, I always think that defines her inauthenticity. Uh, is this language credible? I mean, for you, I guess, Chloe, it is. But there are a lot of people that are very dubious and suspicious of words like authenticity.
Totally. I completely get what you're saying there. And I have to admit, I almost did it a little bit on purpose because as I said, I do understand that right now, people on the left are a lot more skeptical about free speech. This is just, what survey data shows. Even though I
Well,
understand,
I
hey,
think we have
look,
to be a little more specific on. I just don't buy that because most of my friends are on the left, and I
okay.
don't see any of them worried about free speech.
Well, that's good. I'm truly glad to hear
So
that.
if
But
I ran my own survey research, we would find the opposite.
okay. Well, you mentioned Ariana Huffington, and I think she's on the left. Is that safe to say?
I think she's wherever she thinks you want her to be.
Okay. So
To be
anyway,
polite.
to your point about using words like authentic, I was deliberately trying to use the language of people that might be a little bit skeptical or uncomfortable about free speech. And it's the same people that are often like to think of themselves as champions of mental health. And I wanted to try to help to kind of flip the script a little bit in their mind to say, hey, wait a minute, actually being authentic, is something that I support. And so therefore, maybe I could support free speech. But on the other hand, you're correct that as a clinical psychologist, I can use the word authentically in a clinical training sense as well. But I think you're right. It's also kind of a bit of a pop psychology word.
What about this concept of self-censorship? I know you get into it in the book. I mean, isn't that just what people learn? That, you know, when you're sitting with someone, if you know that what you're going to say is going to offend them one way or the other, you do self-censor, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, what's wrong with self-censorship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I ask that very question in my book. So I talk about the difference between healthy self restraint and self censorship. Because, of course, the idea is not that we're going to have no filter or just compulsively say everything to everyone all the time. But healthy self restraint would be, your mother in law asks if you like the soup and you say, yes, it's delicious, even though maybe you secretly think it needs a little bit more salt. Self censorship is when you are basically lying to people or masking your true feelings about something. And I've seen examples of this, whether it's usually about something related to politics, which even people who say that they're not interested in politics usually care about topics under that umbrella, because politics, of course, in its etymology really just means, shared space and public life and public values. So maybe for some people it's abortion, some people it's climate change, some people it's gun control. Whatever it is, they have opinions: immigration, welfare spending, violent crime stats and how to handle it. And when people feel like they have to, be around the proverbial soccer moms meeting or dinner party conversation, and people are making jokes about, who they voted for or whatever, and they feel like they have to just smile and nod as if they agree, because they're afraid that if their real views were found out, that they would be, uninvited to the barbecue. That's when we're going beyond just self-restraint into self-censorship.
I have to admit, I don't like barbecue, so I will go out of my way to be disinvited from anyone's barbecue, especially a neighbor's.
It's a figure of speech and you know it.
So you use this word fearlessly as well. It's another word from your lexicon, or your profession's lexicon. What does this mean? It always seems to me, again, another rather slippery word, a word that's being sold by doctors like yourself to people who are by definition fearful and would like to be less fearful but struggle to do it. What does fearlessly mean?
Well, I mean, I truly wish, I mean this, I wish I could have consulted with you, because I do think that I could probably have even come up with a better title. But and
Well, it's a
obviously,
subtitle, because I like the title. Can I say that? I think that's a good, but the subtitle, how to use it fearlessly. If I was browsing, maybe I shouldn't be saying this to you, but if I was browsing in a bookstore or an airport bookshop, I wouldn't buy it because I don't like the F word, fearlessly. But that's just probably my problem rather than
no,
yours.
I actually totally get what you're saying. I just want you to know that it wasn't something I personally came up with, but I really do get what you're saying on that. It is a bit hyperbolic. The idea isn't, truly that we would have no fear. Like a person who truly has no fear would actually end up dead, right? It's a healthy fear that makes us look both ways before we cross the street. So it is a bit hyperbolic, but it's just intended to let people know that this book provides information and tools that will help them to overcome some of these fears and anxieties that many people, even if you haven't encountered them, have about expressing themselves freely in this world today.
Do you think? I mean, you've obviously done a lot of research on this, and you've read a lot of research. Do you think that people are not saying stuff that uh, that would reflect them perhaps at their worst? They might not like people of different color skins or religions or genders or sexualities, and that somehow reflects badly on us as a species, and that if we actually told the truth um, about how we feel about different groups, we would not just shock everybody else, but in a way shock ourselves.
Sure. I mean, I think that we'd probably have some uncomfortable truths that come out. But then the good news is that when we start to unpack those things, that's how we can examine them. So it's really by pushing them inside. If you say have like a mild prejudice or kind of a mild discomfort with something, but you never examine it and you just push it down inside, that's when it can actually become even more exaggerated and fester. Just as an example of this, I share in the book about Daryl Davis, who is a Black R&B singer, and he personally has dozens of KKK hoods that have been given to him by former members of the KKK that just has simply dialogued with and invited them to talk and share. And it wasn't by telling them to shut up because their views are politically incorrect, but it was by having deep, open conversations that they were able to use the gift of language. One of our incredible gifts of language on a cognitive level is that it allows us to unpack and examine our thoughts rationally and to get a little distance from them so that we don't feel like our thoughts are us, that our thoughts are, like the word literally express, that we can get something out of ourselves and be objective about it. Similarly, I tell a story about a former jihadi recruiter, and it was through somebody sitting down and dialoguing with him that he changed and then went on to even, disarm other jihadi recruiters. It's through dialogue that happens, even with, the quote unquote worst ideas.
What are some of your prejudices, maybe that you haven't expressed? You can tell me. I won't be offended, I promise.
Oh boy. Gee, I don't know. Maybe
I
I
mean,
have
you
a
live
thing
in
about
Orlando,
smug
Florida.
intellectuals
Do
from
you,
San Francisco. I
sorry?
don't know. Maybe I have a thing about smug intellectuals in San Francisco.
Are
I'm
you
just kidding.
suggesting I'm a smug intellectual?
I'm just teasing you, truly. Yeah, I don't know. I think of myself truly as a pretty open person.
So there's no groups of people that you actively dislike?
No, not on the basis of any,
Even Publisher Weekly anonymous reviewers?
well, I mean, they can't even spell, right? So, I mean,
Yeah. Well,
how
I
can I
don't know if
be
it's
that hard
their
on
fault. It might
them?
be Publishers Weekly. That may be their problem.
Yeah, well, they liked my previous book, so I just kinda knew that I was expecting this, when I published this book, I
What do you
understood
think? So
it.
you really don't think they have a point that you're actually coming at this as a, for better or worse, a conservative, and that the book is very slanted?
No, no, honestly, I think that it's insulting to liberals to say that. I think that free speech should absolutely be something that we all love and embrace, and I don't think it has to run politically one way or the other.
Interesting. Well, it's an interesting conversation. I may be a little smug, but
I'm just teasing you, sorry.
well, you've ruined my day for me. But maybe I'll put that. Can I have a quote from Dr. Chloe Carmichael? Smug San Francisco intellectual. At least you didn't say I was gay
No, no,
or
you can't
Jewish
because I was
or
only
transgendered.
kidding. You can't come about with that when I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, how would you feel if I was simultaneously gay, Jewish, and transgendered, and in San Francisco, and smug?
Not a big deal to me as long as you don't come into my locker room, is all I'm saying when it comes to the
Oh,
term.
see, now I got you. So
Well, see
you're not in favor of shared locker rooms.
well, no, but that doesn't mean I dislike people who like to dress up as the opposite sex. It just means I don't want them in my locker room because I'm
Uh,
a woman.
yeah, I have to admit, I have the reverse. I want everyone in my locker room.
Fair, fair. So you're being smug again.
I am being smug. That's my middle name. Dr. Chloe Carmichael. Can I say that? We've said it. And congratulations on the new book. Love to have you on the show. And we'll talk again. Thank you so much.